Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. I moved to the city with nothing but a backpack, a bruised heart, and a folder of old memories I didn't know how to unpack. The breakup had left me hollow, each argument replaying like static in my chest. I wanted distance, anonymity. I wanted to disappear into the neon rain and the soft hum of apartment lights above cold, empty streets. The apartment was cheap. Too cheap, I thought at first. A narrow hallway with peeling wallpaper, a living room that smelled faintly of damp carpet and old coffee. And him, my roommate, always there, sitting, awake, always awake. I first noticed him on a Tuesday night, or maybe it was Wednesday. The days blurred. I came home late, rain plastered to my coat, fingers numb. The city hummed outside, cars, distant sirens, jazz from a cafe down the street. And there he was, sitting in the living room, eyes fixed on the front door. Not reading, not scrolling, just staring. "Hey," I said softly. My voice cracked. I had been alone for weeks. Loneliness had a texture, like wet wool against skin. He turned, calm eyes, observant. "You're home late." I lost track of time. I shrugged, embarrassed. My apartment felt smaller than it had on the listing. "Rain makes the city slow down," he said. "I like to watch it." I told myself it made sense. I wanted it to. I wanted him to be normal. Days passed, and I noticed patterns. He was always awake at 3 a.m., sometimes 2:58. I'd hear the subtle click of a lighter, the hum of a heater, the scrape of his chair against the floor. I started to feel watched, not maliciously, just present. I met someone online, a new friend, a warmth I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. Her voice on the phone was gentle, attentive. She laughed at my jokes, remembered small details I'd never shared aloud. I told her about my roommate. She didn't laugh. She didn't judge. She just listened. "You deserve to feel safe," she said once, and the line went silent for a beat. I wanted to believe it, but the red flags grew subtle, insidious. He knew my routines before I said them, when I would leave for class, when I would make coffee, the exact brand of sugar I used. One morning, I came back to find my favorite mug on the counter, clean, the tea bag I'd left soaking the night before removed. "I didn't think you'd want to drink it stale," he said. His tone was soft, innocuous, caring. I told myself I was overthinking. Then came the whispers of impossibility. I would leave my laptop open, forget a password, and later find it logged into accounts I hadn't touched in weeks. Emails I hadn't written appeared, full of memories I didn't think I'd ever shared. The metadata said they had been sent from his device. "You really shouldn't leave things open like that," he said once, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "It's unsafe." I laughed nervously. I told myself it made sense. He was concerned, attentive, helpful. The rational part of me whispered, maybe paranoia was a side effect of isolation. Maybe my heart was broken, and my brain was breaking too. Night after night, I noticed him watching the door, the shadows of my apartment folding over themselves. I started hearing knocks, soft and irregular, on nights when I was home alone. The apartment was silent otherwise. Rain tapped the windows, distant music seeped from neighbors, floorboards groaned under weight I couldn't locate. I froze, breath tight in my chest. "I think someone's outside," I said once, voice small, terrified. "They're not trying to come in," he said calmly. "They're trying to warn you." I blinked. My pulse leapt. "Warn me?" He shrugged, like it was the most ordinary thing. "Sometimes the city speaks through unusual channels. You just have to listen." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to. But the unease settled into my bones, slow and cold. I started noticing things out of place. Photos from my childhood, cut from magazines, taped to the inside of my closet door. Notes in my handwriting, but I had never written them. Songs I had hummed alone were saved on the stereo, queued in order. My online profiles were being watched. Occasionally, burner phones would buzz with silent notifications, messages I hadn't sent, voicemails I didn't remember leaving. I tried rationalization. Maybe he's just meticulous, careful, caring. I told myself it made sense. One rainy night, I stayed up, determined. I watched him. He sat as always, eyes on the door. Then the small movement, the subtle twitch, a hand brushing an invisible pattern in the air. He was tracing something I couldn't see. The feeling hit me like ice. This wasn't insomnia. This was surveillance. I confronted him quietly the next morning in the kitchen. Rain dripped from my coat, puddles spreading over the cracked tiles. "You're watching me," I said, voice almost a whisper. He smiled, slow, calm. "I'm protecting you." I wanted to scream. The sound of the city outside, the hum of streetlights, cars, music, felt suddenly alien. I noticed details I hadn't before. Fingerprints on the inside of my cabinets, dust displaced on shelves, small recordings hidden behind my books. I tried to escape. I started sleeping in different rooms, locking doors, changing passwords, deleting accounts. He would be there, always, observing, patient, unfazed. He knew. He always knew. The new friend, the one who felt like warmth, noticed the change. Her voice trembled the first time I told her. "That's not normal," she said. "You need help." Police got involved after I gathered evidence. Hidden cameras, metadata logs, recordings of him entering my apartment at night. His calm voice, repeating things only I could know, now sounded sinister in the playback. It was during the confrontation in the apartment that everything shattered. He smiled as the officers cuffed him. "I just wanted you to feel safe," he said. Calm, innocuous. I realized then that the thing outside, the one tapping, nudging warning, had been right all along. It had been me, my instincts, the city, small coincidences converging, telling me I was in danger. The world had been signaling, subtle and patient, but I hadn't trusted it. He had constructed a life inside mine, stitched together from fragments of me. My routines, my memories, my online traces. My loneliness had been the doorway. I left the city shortly after. New streets, new apartment. But the feeling never left. The hum of a heater at night, the tap of rain, the reflection in a window. I cannot shake the sense of being observed, of memories existing in someone else's hands. I think about trust now, about privacy boundaries, the invisible threads we leave behind, about obsession, how quietly it can consume a life, and how we can be complicit without knowing it. I am alive. I survived. But every reflection, every note, every new acquaintance carries a shadow. And I wonder often if we ever truly escape the shapes others can construct for us, or if we just learn to walk among them. Story 2. Rain tapped against the window. Neon from the corner cafe spilled across the wet pavement, broken into fragments by puddles. I pressed my forehead against the glass, watching blurred reflections of people I didn't know, living lives I couldn't touch. I had moved here 2 weeks ago, clutching a cardboard box of my few belongings. Divorce still smelled of stale coffee and old perfume, and the apartment's silence felt heavier than my loneliness. My roommate, Jonah, was quiet. Too quiet, and there was one rule: never open the spare bedroom. "It's just storage," he said the first time I asked. Nothing of interest. But every night, when the city slept, I heard it. Soft scratches, like fingernails against wood. A whisper, impossibly faint, curling under the doorframe. I told myself it was the old pipes. I wanted to believe it. I met her at a cafe on the third day. Her name was Mara. She smiled, eyes soft, and asked about my favorite coffee. I spilled a little more than intended. Favorite books, songs, the way my old apartment smelled after rain. She listened, really listened. "You don't have to hide," she said, voice low, careful, understanding. "I can hear the quiet in you." Something about her presence felt like sunlight after weeks of gray. I told myself it was normal to feel comforted, to want human warmth. Back home, the scratching continued. At first, I ignored it. I would leave the hallway light off, pretend I didn't hear the faint whispering behind the locked door. But one night, while making tea, I caught it clearly. Not pipes, a rhythm, an awareness. Jonah leaned against the doorway, coffee in hand. "You hear it too?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Old pipes, Don't let it bother you. His voice had the calm of someone who knew something I didn't, or someone who wanted me to believe I didn't know. Mara texted me that night. "Are you okay? You seem distant." I stared at my phone, rain blurring the neon outside. I hadn't told her about the room, the scratching, the whispers. I rationalized, maybe I was overthinking. Maybe she didn't need to know. But she knew. The next morning, she said casually, "That sound you described, it's probably nothing. But if it bothers you, I can come by." I froze. She hadn't been here. She shouldn't know. I started noticing small, impossible details. Mara knew my routines before I told her. The way I tucked my blanket at night, the song I hummed while making tea, even the coffee mug I always left in the sink. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she paid attention, maybe she cared. But the unease had begun to crawl under my skin. Weeks passed. The spare room became an obsession. I watched the doorknob, counted the scratches on the floorboards outside. The whispers grew into patterns. Late one night, I recorded the sounds on my phone. A faint scraping, a soft, deliberate voice murmuring my name. I couldn't breathe. I played it back repeatedly, each replay tightening my chest, and noticed a subtle shift. The voice, like someone leaning close, just beyond perception, was learning. Waiting. Mara appeared again, casually dropping by. She commented on my messy desk, on a book I had abandoned months ago, on a childhood nickname I hadn't spoken in years. I laughed nervously. "You remember a lot." "I just noticed things," she said, tilting her head. Eyes too sharp, observant, invasive. But I ignored the warning, clinging to the comfort she offered. One rainy evening, I returned to find my phone dead. No notifications, but an email awaited me on my laptop. "Nice apartment. You keep good company. M. Mara." But she hadn't visited, at least not physically. My apartment smelled faintly of her perfume. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. The whispering intensified that night, scratches circling the locked door. I pressed my ear to the wood. A name, my name. A date. The floorboards creaked, footsteps moving toward the living room, then gone. Jonah noticed my agitation. "You're staring at the door again," he said. Calm. Too calm. "Stop. It's just an empty room." I wanted to believe him. I did, but I couldn't. I started seeing impossible things. Mara's profile pictures showing locations I had visited before meeting her, messages echoing private thoughts I hadn't shared, voice notes mimicking my own intonation. It was subtle, almost believable, almost real. I confronted her on the phone. "Why do you know these things?" I asked, voice trembling. "I just listen," she said, smooth, disarming. "You leave trails. Everyone does. Don't worry, I only care." I hung up. My hands shook. My apartment felt smaller, suffocating. The night I couldn't take it anymore, I picked the lock. Heart hammering, hands cold. The key turned. The room was empty. Nothing but dust and the faint smell of old paint. Relief washed over me, then froze. The walls, every wall, covered in photographs. Faces. Every person who had ever lived in that apartment. Some recent, some decades old. Friends, lovers, strangers. Names written in tiny script beneath each. Dates of stay, habits, quirks. And there in the corner, a photograph of me, taken before I ever met Mara. Jonah appeared behind me. Calm. Observant. "I told you not to open it." What is this?" My voice barely rose above a whisper. "History," he said. "Memory. Protection. Or maybe control. You get to decide." I wanted to scream, to run. Instead, I felt something darker, a realization. Mara wasn't just observing. She wasn't just listening. She had been building this, sculpting reality around me, long before I trusted her. Police reports followed. Evidence. IP addresses traced, burner phones, metadata logs, photos, fake profiles, tracking devices in the apartment. Mara was not who she claimed to be. Multiple identities, multiple victims, long-term obsession documented with frightening precision. Jonah, he had known. Maybe he had helped. Maybe he had been her first observer. I couldn't untangle the threads. I left the apartment that night. Rain pounding, neon reflecting off wet streets. Sirens in the distance. Every step felt both liberating and terrifying. The city was alive, uncaring, and different. Weeks later, I sit in another apartment. Safe. Yet the scratches echo in my memory. The whispers are quiet but persistent in the corners of my mind. I check locks, phones, windows, routines. I scan every profile, every message. Trust has become fragile glass. I wonder if Mara still watches. If she catalogs me among her memories, walls covered in faces of people she knows, people she imagines, people she controls. I have survived. I have escaped. But the reflection of myself in the window is always fractured. And I think, finally, with cold clarity, privacy is an illusion. Trust is a liability. Obsession thrives where boundaries blur. Memory can be stolen, identity borrowed, and safety always conditional. Story 3. I moved here to disappear. The city's rain made it easy. Wet asphalt reflected neon signs and fractured lines, and I liked tracing them, pretending they were pieces of myself scattered somewhere I couldn't reach. My apartment smelled faintly of detergent and cold plaster. It was empty enough to breathe, quiet enough to hear the hum of the refrigerator and my own restless thoughts. I wasn't ready for company. I shouldn't have agreed to a roommate, but the rent was steep and isolation had a way of bleeding into walls. Claire arrived like she was part of the city already, effortless, calm, and attentive. She asked the right questions: favorite coffee, music, habits. She remembered everything. I told myself it made sense. People notice things about others. The first time I saw it, I thought I was imagining. I was brushing my teeth. Claire's reflection lingered in the bathroom mirror a second too long. I froze. She was supposed to be behind me, but the reflection, it paused, then blinked. "Did you just?" I swallowed. "See what?" she said. Her voice was soft, amused, and measured. Nothing in the world had prepared me for the quietness that followed. My pulse raced in the tiled room, my own breath loud and uneven. I wanted to believe it was nothing. Maybe I was overthinking. Days passed. Claire's reflection kept moving slightly off, subtle shifts I couldn't ignore. When I looked again, the reflection sometimes stared at me, even when the real Claire's eyes were turned away. My stomach knotted. I laughed it off. "It's a trick of light," I whispered to the empty apartment, tracing the fogged mirror with my finger. She, my roommate, was always there, attentive, charming, human. She cooked pasta like she had always known exactly how I liked it. She hummed the songs I hummed alone in my kitchen. She remembered my old nickname, the one only my ex ever used. Every detail, every habit, every buried memory I had told no one. It was in her voice, in her smile, in the tilt of her head. I should have left. I should have. But I wanted someone to understand me. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. One evening, rain rattled against the window panes. I was curled on the sofa with a mug of lukewarm tea when my phone buzzed, a new voicemail. No number, no name. I hesitated, then pressed play. "You left your scarf on the balcony. You'll catch a cold." "I've taken care of it." I froze. My scarf? The one I left by the sliding door this morning? I hadn't said a word. Not to anyone. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint jazz from the street cafe below, the distant wail of a siren, all of it felt sharper. Every sound a thread connecting me to her. When I confronted Claire, she tilted her head, eyes calculating, and said, "I just noticed it. Thought you'd want it back." The calm, intelligent inflection. The way she always knew exactly what to say to make me believe nothing was wrong. I told myself it made sense. Maybe she was observant. Maybe I was imagining patterns. Weeks slipped past. Small things grew into unease. My emails were read before I opened them. My calendar appointments shifted without explanation. I found my favorite pens moved from drawer to desk. Music playlists rearranged. Social media accounts liked photos I hadn't shared. Then one night, the snow glass fogged on the bathroom mirror. Claire's reflection leaned closer to me. I leaned back. Something in her eyes. It wasn't Claire. Not exactly. It was waiting, studying. I checked the apartment directory, the lease. Claire had moved out. Weeks ago. No forwarding address. I had assumed she was away, busy visiting family. But the evidence was clear. The reflection was the one living here. I started sleeping with the lights on, the door locked, my phone beside me buzzing with notifications I couldn't ignore. I traced footsteps in the hallway. The apartment creaked in ways it hadn't before. I could feel her presence in every shadow. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. "Hi," a voice said through the door. Calm. Familiar. "I thought you might be cold. I brought a blanket." I didn't open it. I couldn't. I called the police, but there was no trace. No one matching her description had been reported. The building manager shrugged. No security cameras in the hallway. Nothing. I installed cameras, tracking apps, burner phones, anything I could. Everything was cataloged, every digital footprint analyzed. And still she knew. Always one step ahead. I began documenting. Every reflection, every movement, every hum in the refrigerator, every shadow. Voice notes captured the faintest whisper of her presence. Metadata revealed nothing, but her attention was obsessive, intimate, unrelenting. She knew my routines. My favorite cafe. The bench I sat at on rainy evenings. The songs I hummed under my breath. My old habits. She had constructed herself around me, perfectly mirrored, perfectly invasive. When I confronted her finally, she smiled. That same intelligent, observing smile. "You think you've been alone," she said. Calm like a friend. "But I've always been here." I ran. Through wet streets, past neon puddles, through fog and traffic. My breaths came in ragged bursts. I called everyone, police, friends, everyone who might anchor me to reality. But the reflection lingered in my mind, in the way I watched mirrors, in the way shadows stretched on walls. Weeks later, evidence caught up. CCTV revealed her sneaking into the building after hours. Hidden cameras confirmed what I already knew. She had multiple identities, constructed over months, maybe years. Every victim a reflection of someone she'd studied, observed, mirrored. She was arrested, tried. But even in court, she remained unnervingly calm, articulate, emotionally intelligent. She never confessed fully. Her obsession was complete, her identity intertwined with mine, with everyone she targeted. I returned to the apartment once it was cleared. It smelled of antiseptic and emptiness. Rain tapped against the window. The refrigerator hummed. Shadows stretched like fingers across the walls. I could still feel her in every reflection, in every quiet sound. I moved again, far from the streets I had once traced in neon puddles. But the experience remained, etched into my nervous system. Mirrors, reflections, shadows, they are no longer neutral. They carry intent. They can lie. I often think of her, the reflection, and I wonder about the fragility of privacy, of identity, of trust. We give pieces of ourselves to the world, and someone somewhere might build a life around those fragments. Someone might inhabit the spaces we leave. Someone might mirror us so perfectly we can't tell where we end and they begin. I survived, but survival is not the same as safety. And safety, I've learned, is always borrowed. The apartment still exists in memory, humming fridge, fogged mirrors, shadows that watch. And sometimes, when the rain taps my window in fractured neon lines, I see her. Not the real Claire, never her, but the reflection she left behind. I never touch mirrors the same way again. I never will. Story 4. Rain tapped against the window pane, soft and insistent. I was curled on the edge of my bed, staring at the neon reflection of the streetlights bleeding through the glass. My apartment smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, the kind of city odor that sticks to your clothes and your hair. I had moved here after everything fell apart. After the breakup that left my chest hollow, the divorce papers that smelled like ink and finality, the long, quiet nights where I questioned if I even knew who I was anymore. I told myself the city could save me, or maybe just distract me. The ad said, roommate wanted. Clean, considerate, quiet. I hadn't expected perfection. When Alex first walked through the door, they smiled. Polite, warm, but not overly so. They carried a small suitcase and a thermos of coffee, the kind I liked, black, no sugar. Somehow they'd remembered. Somehow they knew. I noticed your kettle was old, they said the first night, unpacking with careful precision. I brought a new one. I thought you might like it. I blinked. My chest tightened. I wanted to believe it was coincidence. Maybe it was. The first week, Alex was nothing but considerate. They cleaned after themselves, laughed softly when I talked, and never overstepped. They remembered small details, my favorite song on Spotify, the way I liked my shower hot, the exact brand of peanut butter I used. I told myself it made sense. A careful person, attentive. Maybe this was normal. But then the small things started. I'd wake up, and the kitchen would be rearranged exactly how I liked it. My mug would be on the counter, my notebook open to the page I'd been writing in the night before. Emails I hadn't sent were neatly drafted in my inbox. Notes to myself that I'd forgotten existed appeared in my handwriting, or so it seemed. I must be losing it, I whispered once, alone in the apartment. The rain had stopped, leaving puddles that reflected the pale orange streetlights. Footsteps echoed softly from the hall, though I lived on the top floor. One night, I found my phone buzzing. A new voice note. I pressed play. "Hey," Alex's voice said, calm, intimate. "I know you didn't sleep well. I left your tea on the table. I hope it helps." I froze. My bedroom door had been closed. I hadn't left tea anywhere. I told myself maybe I'd dreamt it. Maybe I'd forgotten making it. I wanted to believe it. A week later, at the cafe I always went to after work, Alex was there. Sitting in my favorite corner, wearing the same jacket I liked. "You always sit there," they said softly, eyes reflecting the dim morning light. "I thought you might like some company." I laughed, a little too sharply. "That's weirdly convenient." They tilted their head, gentle. "Convenient? Or considerate?" I didn't answer. I wanted to leave, but I didn't. Something about their calmness, their quiet understanding, made me feel safe. But the safety was brittle. The unease grew. My apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. The hum of the fridge, the low buzz of the heater, even the soft creak of the floorboards, they all felt like accomplices. I'd catch glimpses of reflections in the window. Someone standing behind me. I'd spin around. Nothing. Just shadows. Just the fog drifting through the streets. Then I saw it. My old photos, tucked in a drawer I hadn't opened in years, were gone. Replaced by exact copies, but with small differences. A smile slightly wider, a hand in a different position, my childhood dog staring at the camera in a way it never had. My own history remade. "I must be imagining this," I muttered. But Alex's presence became intrusive. Not aggressively, not loudly, just there. In my space, in my mind. They knew when I showered, when I cooked, when I texted my mother. I started checking my phone obsessively. Metadata. Read receipts. Tiny indicators of someone following me. And then came the dating app profiles that looked like me. Warnings in the form of messages from friends, screenshots, photos I hadn't shared. Alex would smile when I confronted them. Calm. Observant. "I just like to know you," they said once, voice low, almost reverent. "I like to be part of your life." I wanted to believe it was harmless. Maybe I was overthinking. I stopped leaving the apartment alone. I double-checked locks, unplugged devices, erased caches. But it didn't matter. I'd hear footsteps outside my door, the faint hiss of breathing in the kitchen. Notes left in my handwriting that I'd never written. My own life was no longer mine. And yet, the city never felt empty. Rain streaked the windows. Neon reflections of the streets outside painted the walls in motion. Jazz from the bar downstairs seeped through the floorboards. The hum of my apartment appliances seemed alive, vibrating with a quiet tension. Every sound reminded me I was being watched, and yet, I couldn't leave. One evening I tried. Packed a bag, left a note. I ran into the foggy streets. Sirens distant, puddles reflecting the cold city lights. I didn't make it far. Alex was there, waiting. Calm, knowing. "You don't have to run," they said softly. "I just want us to be the same." Their words wrapped around me like a shroud. My chest tightened. "Be the same?" "Yes," they whispered. "I know you. Better than anyone. You can't hide from me. You can't hide from yourself. I couldn't argue. I realized then, Alex wasn't just a person. They were a shadow of me, a meticulously constructed echo, someone or something that had copied my life so perfectly that no one else could tell the difference. My friends, my family, the city itself, they would see me, and they'd see Alex too. And soon, no one could tell who was real. I ran, this time to the police. I showed them evidence, the fake profiles, the voice notes, the surveillance, the metadata. Officers listened, skeptical at first, but the proof was undeniable. The city's digital trails, the cameras, everything pointed to the same person, or at least the same method. Alex had done this before. Multiple victims, each erased and mirrored, each replaced by a version of themselves that only Alex truly controlled. The confrontation was quiet, not explosive, not cinematic, just meticulous unraveling. Alex's calm composure cracked when faced with evidence. They didn't yell. They didn't run. They simply existed, a reflection trapped in a net of their own obsession. I watched them taken away, polite, compliant, unnervingly serene. Afterwards, the apartment felt empty, silent but with traces, footprints in the dust, slight rearrangements I couldn't explain. Even now, months later, I hear the rain tapping against the window, faint footsteps echoing in the hall, and I wonder if some part of Alex still lingers in the reflection of neon streets. I've learned to trust again cautiously. I've rebuilt routines, but every time I log onto my phone, every time I open a drawer, I check. Not just for Alex, but for the possibility that someone could know me that intimately, that invasively, that someone could remake me entirely, and I wouldn't even recognize myself. Identity is fragile. Privacy is fleeting. And obsession doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, and it knows your favorite coffee, your favorite seat, your favorite song, and maybe, just maybe, it knows you better than you know yourself. Story 5. Rain streaked the dorm windows in silver lines. Neon from the corner cafe bled into the foggy streets below. I traced the patterns with a fingertip, thinking about how easily life could be fragmented, broken into reflections. I had moved here 2 weeks ago, clutching a duffel bag heavier with loneliness than clothes. My recent breakup had left me hollow, a body moving through halls of strangers, avoiding mirrors, avoiding myself. Room 312 was cramped. The walls smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. My roommate, Ian, occupied the lower bunk. Quiet, polite, mostly invisible. Except for one rule: don't look under the bed. I laughed the first time he said it, nervously, awkwardly. What, like a monster? Just trust me, he said. Voice low, calm, observant. Don't look. And I didn't. Not at first. Nights were the hardest. Rain tapping windows. Fluorescent hallway lights flickering outside our door. My laptop hummed softly, the only companion in my restless room. Then whispers. Faint. Almost too quiet to hear. Not Ian. Not entirely. I told myself it was the building settling. I wanted to believe it. I told myself I was overthinking. I met her at the student cafe that Thursday. Amelia. Warm smile, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes soft but intelligent. She asked about my classes, my favorite books, my preferred coffee blend. I told her more than I intended. Stories of my apartment, my old cat, a nickname my ex used, the song I hummed when nervous. She listened, really listened. You don't have to carry it all, she said gently, voice low, careful. It's okay to be fragile sometimes. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I wanted to believe it. Back in the dorm, the whispers persisted. I started noticing the timing, always when I turned away, when the light flickered low, when the room was silent. One night, as I climbed into my bunk, I froze. A voice, identical to Ian's, whispered from below. Don't look under the bed. I froze, heart racing, breath uneven. Ian's voice, yes, but he wasn't there. The lower bunk was empty. I tried rationalizing. Maybe Ian had a vent or a microphone for sleep studies. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe Amelia's comforting presence made me less rational. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. But the unease grew. Amelia seemed to know things she shouldn't. She showed up outside the library minutes before I arrived, carrying the same textbook I had forgotten at the cafe the day before. She knew I liked my coffee black, no sugar. She hummed a song I hadn't played in months, offhand, as if it had been in her head for days. I wanted to dismiss it. I rationalized coincidence. Maybe she noticed. Maybe she cared. The whispers escalated. I began recording them on my phone. Faint, low-frequency murmurs. Sometimes my name, sometimes fragments of my thoughts, repeated back to me as if someone had learned them by heart. I checked under the bed once. Nothing. Dust. Empty space. But a faint indentation in the carpet suggested something had been there recently. Then the first strange coincidence with Amelia. "You forgot your scarf," she said in the hallway, holding a red wool scarf I hadn't packed in months. I stared. It smelled faintly like rain, like my old apartment. "How?" I started. "I noticed," she said, calm, disarming. "It was just lying on the bench this morning." Impossible. I never left it there. I began noticing patterns, surveillance. My social media posts flagged by her comments before I even posted. Burner emails traced back to accounts she supposedly didn't own. Voice notes replicating my tone, asking questions I hadn't yet asked myself. I tried to leave. Walks in the city. Rain tapping rooftops. Neon reflections in puddles. Each step felt measured, tracked. My phone buzzed constantly, subtle, almost playful. Amelia's name always missing, but I could feel her presence. One night, I climbed to my bunk and whispered, almost to myself, "Where are you, Ian?" The whisper came again, low, frantic. "It's not me, don't look." I froze. Ian wasn't in his bed. He hadn't been there for days. He was hiding somewhere, terrified. Replaced by something. Something learned. Something watching. I started documenting everything. Photos of the dorm, timestamps of whispers, screenshots, metadata logs, notes in my phone. Amelia's visits became invasive. She knew routines, habits, minor injuries, songs I sang while showering. I rationalized, maybe she cared. Maybe she was trying to help. But fear clawed at me. Then came the climax. I received a package at the dorm. No return address. Inside, my diary, my notes, my recordings annotated. Each entry marked with dates I hadn't written, locations I hadn't visited. Someone had been inside my room. Someone had observed every moment. I called the campus police. They arrived in silence, rain pooling at their shoes. Evidence collected, burner phones, hacked accounts, AI voice replication, metadata analysis. Amelia, real name unknown, was not real. She was multiple personas, stalking students for months, crafting identities around their routines, manipulating trust, building intimacy like a trap. Ian, the real roommate, had been hiding on campus, terrified of what had replaced him. I never saw him again. Weeks later, I moved to another dorm. Safe, officially cleared, but the whispers lingered in memory. Rain tapping the windows, humming appliances, neon reflections. Every step on creaking dorm floors feels observed. Every social media notification triggers caution. My phone buzzes at night. My mind assumes the worst. I survived. I escaped. But something has changed inside me. Trust is fragile, privacy a myth. The person I believed was safe, the comforting presence, the attentive listener, was a construct, a meticulously built obsession. My memory, my habits, my identity were toys in a predator's game. And I think, finally, in quiet reflection, boundaries are fragile. Trust can be weaponized. Memory can be observed, replicated, controlled. Safety is never absolute. And sometimes the thing under the bed is not the monster you imagined. It's the reflection of your own vulnerability, mirrored back, meticulously learned, patiently waiting. Story 6. I was broke. That was the first truth I couldn't escape. My wallet was a thin envelope of disappointment. Tuition, food, transport, it all added up, and somehow rent had to fit in. I hadn't eaten properly in 2 days when I found the ad. Room for rent. Cheap. Safe. Quiet. The apartment smelled faintly of oil paint and old wood when I arrived. The hallway was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb. I knocked. "Come in," a calm voice said. The roommate, she introduced herself as Mara, smiled like she knew exactly what I needed. She was slender, quiet, attentive, but not in the obvious way. More like a presence you felt before you saw it. "Rent's cheap," she said, pouring tea into 2 chipped mugs. "One rule: pay before midnight. No exceptions." I laughed nervously. "Fair. I can manage that." I told myself it made sense. A simple rule, a cheap room, some stability. That was all I needed. The first night, the apartment hummed with a gentle life of its own. Appliances breathed. Pipes whispered. Rain tapped against the window in uneven rhythms. Neon from the street outside pooling across the linoleum. I slept for the first time in weeks without my chest knotting in anxiety. Then I forgot. It was only one night. I had stayed late at the library, chasing notes, chasing deadlines. The clock struck 12. I remembered too late. The apartment didn't punish me. Not immediately. But the doors, they shifted. The hallways stretched impossibly. I reached for the bathroom, and it was farther away than it should be. The lights flickered in staccato pulses, each one a heartbeat I could not sync with. I told myself I was tired, overworked, imagining things. Maybe I was overthinking. The next morning, Mara was gone. The apartment felt smaller and larger at the same time, like a room folding in on itself. And yet, subtle things had changed. My favorite mug, the one I had left on the counter, was in the sink. My coat, hung neatly, wasn't where I remembered leaving it. She knew. She had been here. Or something had. Over the next few days, the late-night missed rent escalated. Every delay, every forgotten payment, stole pieces of me. I forgot a friend's name, a routine, a memory of my old campus library. Photographs blurred when I looked at them. My reflection in the windows sometimes hesitated, blinked differently than I did. Mara returned, or someone who looked like her. "You're forgetting things," she said, voice soft, almost intimate. "I can help you remember." I wanted to believe it. I did. Her attentiveness felt warm. She knew my favorite cafe, my old songs, my coffee order, even the names I whispered to myself alone in my room. Every detail she repeated perfectly. Every memory she reclaimed for me. And yet, every time she smiled, it was like she was studying me, exactly as I was before the memories slipped. The apartment became a living organism. Hallways wound endlessly. Doors opened into rooms I didn't recognize. Shadows moved differently than light dictated. Appliances hummed louder, their noises punctuating my heartbeat. The phone buzzed at midnight. I hesitated before answering. "You forgot again," a voice said. Calm, measured, knowing. I didn't respond. I wanted to, but the words felt gone, stolen. I started documenting. Every floorboard creak, every buzz, every small flicker of the neon light outside. Social media posts I didn't remember writing. Messages I didn't remember sending. The metadata told nothing. The logs were clean. Yet she knew. She knew everything. I confronted her once in the kitchen. "You don't even live here," I said. My voice was trembling. She tilted her head, faintly amused. "I do, and I always will, but only if you pay." I realized then what rent truly meant. Not money, not even survival. Memory, identity. Every late payment carved away a piece of me, and she was the one collecting it, weaving herself into the fragments. I ran, of course, through rain-soaked streets, past flickering signs and cafes I barely recognized. But the apartment followed, not physically but in my mind, in reflections, in the hum of appliances in other buildings, in shadows stretching just a little too long. I sought help. Police, friends, anyone who would believe the apartment itself could steal memory. Cameras, tracking apps, digital locks, they revealed nothing. Nothing but my own confusion. And yet, everywhere I went she had been, or a piece of her. Months passed. I reconstructed fragments of myself, photographs, diaries, texts. But the experience had marked me. I avoided mirrors. I avoided empty rooms. My own reflection felt unreliable. The real Mara? I discovered her weeks later, hidden in a campus basement, terrified, whispering to herself about the apartment that had replaced her. The person who had lived in my room, she had been someone else entirely. Multiple identities. Obsessive, patient, intelligent. She collected pieces of life from each tenant, weaving herself into their memories, until the original person no longer existed. Confrontation came quietly. The police arrested her in an empty apartment across town. Evidence? Diaries, calendars, photographs of every tenant. Metadata, emails, digital surveillance logs. She never confessed fully. Why would she? She believed in the system she had built. The rule of rent before midnight, the inevitability of forgetting. I returned to my small, cheap apartment once it was cleared. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. Neon puddles shimmered on the linoleum. Every hum, every creak, every flicker was a reminder of absence. I was myself again, yet different. Fragmented, vulnerable in ways I could not articulate. I often think about memory now, about how fragile it is, how easily it can be collected, traded, lost. I wonder about boundaries, about the ethics of observation, about the invisible invasions we accept in the guise of kindness. Trust feels like a currency now. Privacy, a fragile luxury. I survive, but the apartment, its shadows, its humming, its long, impossible hallways, lingers in my mind. I touch mirrors lightly, cautiously. I open doors slowly, wary of what might stretch beyond. The rent is due always, and sometimes in quiet moments I fear I will forget again. And when I do, I know someone will be waiting. Story 7. Rain hammered the windows in short, staccato bursts. Neon signs blurred into streaks of red and blue across the wet pavement. I sat on the edge of my bed, sipping lukewarm coffee, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Alone, yet not alone. I had just moved after the breakup, after the divorce that left my chest hollow and my apartment silent. Every corner smelled of old paper, dust, and a faint trace of myself that I wasn't sure I recognized anymore. The ad had seemed safe, roommate wanted. Responsible, tidy, quiet. I didn't expect perfection. But when Lena walked in with a small, black suitcase, her presence was gentle, attentive, calm. She smiled, and somehow the world felt lighter. "I noticed your kettle looked a bit old," she said as she unpacked. "I brought a new one. Thought it might make mornings easier." I blinked. My chest tightened. How did she know? I told myself it made sense. Coincidence. I wanted to believe it. The first days were normal. Too normal. She remembered my coffee order, my favorite mug, the exact way I liked my music at night. She was there when I needed company, absent when I craved solitude. I rationalized everything. It's just kindness. I'm overthinking. Then the cameras appeared. Small, sleek, almost invisible. For safety, Lena explained when I noticed the first one above the hallway mirror. You never know these days. A precaution. I nodded, uneasy but compliant. I told myself it made sense. The city could be dangerous. I'd been alone for weeks. Maybe I needed protection. A week later, I realized I was being watched even in places there were no cameras. The shower, the bedroom, even the dark corner of the living room I thought safe. Footsteps in the hall at odd hours. A faint rustle from the vents. My phone buzzed with notifications I hadn't expected. Voice notes with soft breathing, messages drafted in my email, reminders I hadn't set. I started checking everything obsessively. Metadata, security logs, tiny indicators that someone or something was inside the apartment. But Lena remained calm, composed, soothing. "I've seen the alerts too," she said once, her hand brushing my shoulder. "I think someone else has been here. For years, maybe. That's why I set up the cameras." Her words were strange, convincing. I wanted to believe her. I told myself it made sense. And then I found the recordings. A small USB stick left on the kitchen counter, labeled neatly, "For your eyes only." I plugged it in. Video. My bedroom. My bed. Me sleeping. But not from the ceiling. Not from the corner. Inside the walls. The camera had been inside the walls. Watching me. Every night. I froze. The hum of the fridge sounded suddenly sinister, the dripping of the sink like a metronome marking my panic. Lena came in. "You saw it," she said softly. Not angry, not defensive, just present, observant. I didn't know until recently. I wasn't the first to notice. That's why I installed the cameras. Not for me. For us. For us. My voice cracked. "Yes," she said, calm, precise. "Someone's been living here. Inside the walls. Watching. Recording. Maybe for years. I only wanted to protect you." The apartment felt impossibly small. Every creak, every floorboard, every whisper of air through the vent sounded alive. Shadows moved differently now. Neon reflections bounced off surfaces with an almost malicious awareness. My coffee tasted bitter in my mouth. Lena guided me to the living room, where more recordings played. Previous tenants, footage I couldn't explain, movements that didn't belong to anyone. I understood then. She had been fighting a ghost. A presence older than her, older than me, embedded in the apartment itself. She had set up cameras everywhere to map the intruder, to predict it. Even then, the tension never eased. The city outside continued with indifferent violence. Rain streaked the streets. Cars splashed through puddles. Jazz from the bar downstairs filtered through the floorboards. Every sound, every reflection in the windows, a reminder that we were not alone. Some nights, I woke to the sensation of someone beside me. Not Lena. Another presence. Breathing. Watching. The realization that someone or something had learned the apartment's rhythms, our rhythms, made every movement a calculation. We began documenting. Logs. Scam shots. Metadata. Every suspicious activity. Dating app profiles, social media posts, emails. It was exhaustive, obsessive. And yet, every discovery revealed something deeper. Shadows inside walls. Heat signatures where there shouldn't have been. Whispered noises through the vents. Evidence that the intruder was patient, intelligent, and terrifyingly precise. Through it all, Lena remained calm. Her intelligence, her observation, her presence, it was unnerving. Yet I began to trust her. She knew the apartment, she knew the intruder's patterns, she knew me. Sometimes too well. She remembered small details about my life that I hadn't told her. Old nicknames, favorite songs, habits I didn't realize I'd left exposed. I rationalized. She's been watching too. Maybe that's why she knows. One night, we found a hidden crawl space behind the closet wall. Dust, old food wrappers, footprints too small for anyone we'd seen. The intruder had been living inside for years. Lena's theory was right. And yet, the fear remained. How long had it been watching us? Did it know we knew? Confrontation came quietly. Police arrived after we recorded evidence. Everything from hidden cameras to metadata logs to the crawl space. Lena walked with them, calm, showing the layout, guiding them through months of obsessive surveillance. The intruder's traces were there, scattered like shadows, but no one expected what we found next. The walls were empty. Not gone, but every sign pointed to long-term habitation. A ghost mapped in dust and memory. The apartment was reclaimed, but the peace was hollow. Silence felt louder than ever. Every creak, every hum of the appliances, every distant siren reminded me of the intrusion. I slept with lights on. I left devices unplugged. I checked every corner for movement. Months later, I can still hear the faint rustle of the vents. I can still see neon reflections bouncing unnaturally across the walls. And Lena, she moved out quietly, leaving a note. "I hope it helps you sleep. But remember, safety is relative." I survived. The intruder was gone, or at least I hope so. Yet something in me has changed. I know now that privacy is an illusion. Observation is not always violent. Sometimes it is patient, quiet, methodical. Identity is fragile, boundaries are permeable, and safety is never guaranteed. I stare at the rain outside, listening to the city hum. Footsteps echo in my head, even when the hallway is empty. Shadows in the corners feel alive. I realize that fear, once rooted in strangers, now lives in memory itself. And sometimes, the observer is no longer outside, but inside, watching, learning, knowing. Trust is delicate. Obsession is patient. Memory is a weapon. And I have learned to live with all of it, though I will never again sleep as if I am truly alone. Story 8. Rain drummed against the dorm windows. Neon from the corner cafe fractured in puddles on the pavement below. I pressed my forehead to the glass, listening to the hum of the city and feeling the hollow echo inside me. The breakup was still raw. A wound I didn't want to admit was bleeding. Every night, the apartment's silence weighed heavier than the cardboard boxes I'd moved in with. My dorm room felt too large and too small at once. Too empty, yet claustrophobic. Across from my bed was another, made as if someone had slept in it hours ago. I would see wrinkles in the sheets I hadn't made, the blanket slightly folded over, the pillow indented. A faint warmth lingered on the mattress, like it had just been left. I asked my housing coordinator. "There's no roommate assigned to you," she said, voice clipped over the phone. "It's just you." I wanted to believe it was nothing. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe I was overthinking. The first note appeared on my desk that evening. Handwritten, small letters, neat. "Don't sleep in this bed. Please. You don't know what happens." I blinked. My hand trembled. I hadn't written it. The note smelled faintly of rain and paper, as if freshly bought. I shoved it in my backpack, thinking maybe a prank, maybe a friend. I told myself it made sense. Later that night, I heard whispers. Soft, fleeting, like someone muttering into a phone, or rehearsing a speech in a hushed room. The sound came from the empty bed, low enough to make the hairs on my neck prickle. I rationalized, the heating vents, the hum of the city, the pipes. Then she appeared, Clara. She worked at the student cafe down the block. Warm, empathetic, attentive. She noticed me before I could speak, smiled, asked about my day, my coffee, my favorite table. She remembered my order the next morning, brought it to me without me asking. "You seem tired," she said, soft, observing. "It's okay. You can rest." I wanted to believe her. I told myself she was just kind, but there was a precision in the way she noticed my habits. The way I rubbed my temples when stressed, the books I left open on the wrong page, the way I hummed a song I hadn't sung in years. The notes multiplied, each one more urgent. "Do not sleep here. It knows you. Leave before it's too late." The handwriting was consistent, but no one else had entered my room, no one else had a key. My roommate didn't exist. My records were clean. I began documenting everything. Photos of the bed, the notes, timestamps. My phone buzzed late at night with unknown numbers, voice notes in my own tone asking questions I hadn't thought to ask. Clara knew details about my life she couldn't have, my childhood nickname, the cafe I used to haunt, even the song I hummed while making tea. I rationalized, maybe she was just attentive, caring. I wanted to believe it. Footsteps echoed in the hallway at odd hours. Appliances hummed when I hadn't turned them on. The radiator hissed. A siren wailed down the street. The bed shifted slightly during the day, just enough for me to notice. I tried staying out, walking the city streets, rain soaking my jacket, neon reflections in puddles, soft jazz bleeding from cafes. But the apartment called me back, and the empty bed waited. I attempted to sleep in it once. Just once. The warmth enveloped me, soft at first, comforting. Then the whispers began. "Don't lie here. Leave." The voice was not Clara's. Not mine. Not anyone living. It was a mimicry, subtle, intelligent, invasive. I bolted awake, heart hammering. That morning, I checked the housing records again. No roommate. No one assigned. I called campus security. Nothing unusual recorded on cameras. No one entered the room. I was alone. Clara continued to appear. Always just in time. She knew which aisle I lingered in at the campus bookstore, which songs I queued on Spotify, the way I left my bag slightly unzipped. I told myself I was safe. I told myself she was just observant, kind, helpful. I wanted to believe it, but the whispers followed. They adapted to me. They repeated my thoughts back to me. They learned my hesitations, my fears, my patterns. The next note was different. Urgent, almost frantic. "It isn't me. I'm gone. Please leave this room." You don't understand what it does. My hands shook. I looked under the bed. Empty. No one. Dust undisturbed, except for the faintest indentation in the carpet, like someone had pressed their weight into it hours ago. I called the campus housing office in tears. They pulled old assignment logs. No one had ever lived in this bed before me, they insisted. But one file surfaced, a previous tenant, a student who had vanished without record, leaving an email to housing staff. Never assign this room again. The truth was slowly revealed. The bed was a trap, a warning from the past. The previous tenant had left messages, subtle manipulations, notes that somehow knew the next occupant's fears. My roommate didn't exist because the room itself was haunted, not by ghosts, but by the obsession of memory, a previous inhabitant's final act of warning. Clara? She wasn't real either, or at least not as I had believed. The comfort I felt was a construct of attention, carefully built around my vulnerabilities. Some messages were automated, some human, some AI voiced, some forged to imitate intimacy. Every red flag I rationalized became a thread in a web of observation I couldn't untangle. Police investigated, checked digital footprints, metadata, and campus cameras. Evidence confirmed what I had suspected. The notes, the whispers, the illusions of presence, all meticulously staged by the previous occupant, a student obsessed with ensuring no one else slept there. The bed, the desk, the room itself had become a vessel for paranoia and caution, a psychological trap turned survival message. I moved rooms, away from 312, away from the whispers, the empty bed, the neon-streaked windows, the humming appliances. I survived. I escaped, but I remained changed. My trust in observation, in presence, in memory itself was fractured. Rain still taps my window in my new dorm. Neon reflects in puddles. I walk the streets carefully, aware of every footstep behind me, every note I might leave, every pattern I unconsciously reveal. And I reflect. Trust is fragile. Privacy is a veneer. Obsession can survive through absence, through memory, through careful manipulation. Safety is never guaranteed, and sometimes the emptiest spaces carry the loudest warnings. Story 9. I moved into the city hoping for anonymity. After the divorce, after the months of therapy that barely reached the raw edges of me, I wanted a space where I could be quiet, alone, invisible. The apartment smelled faintly of damp plaster and the ghost of cooking. Neon from the street outside pooled across the linoleum in fractured colors. Rain tapped the window relentlessly, a rhythm I found both soothing and alien. The first day, I unpacked slowly. My boxes smelled of old books and perfume I'd abandoned. Footsteps from the apartment above echoed in uneven taps, like a heartbeat I couldn't trust. The refrigerator hummed. The kettle hissed. Everything was small, intimate, alive. When I met my roommate, Mara, she was all calm smiles and quiet attentiveness. Her presence was warm without demanding attention. She asked about my favorite coffee, my routines, the songs I liked. I told myself it made sense. People noticed details. People cared. I wanted to believe it. That night, I found a note on the fridge. Handwritten neat. Roommate's rules. Do not answer knocks after 10 p.m. Do not look through the peephole. Do not speak if you hear your name from the kitchen. I laughed. It was charming, almost absurd. I pictured Mara carefully posting rules like a librarian. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I was overthinking. The first rule came true the very next night. A knock echoed through the apartment after 10. My pulse hitched. I rationalized it. Late neighbor drunk. I didn't answer. The knocking continued for minutes. Then it stopped. Silence followed. I told myself I was imagining it. The second rule followed quickly. A soft metallic scrape from the door. I peeked through the peephole. Nothing, but the hallway stretched impossibly. Shadows shifted where light should have fallen. My reflection in the peephole's glass was wrong. My eyes blinked out of sync. I recoiled. I told myself it made sense. Exhaustion, stress, trauma. Then the third rule. A voice whispered my name from the kitchen. Soft, familiar, casual. I froze. My throat dry, my chest tight. I said nothing. The voice repeated, patient, almost amused. I wanted to believe it was Mara. I wanted to believe she was protecting me. Days passed. Every rule I ignored or obeyed came true. The apartment adapted around me. Doors that should have been solid warped, stretched, folded into hallways that never ended. Appliances hummed louder than physics allowed. Shadows pooled in corners with shapes that felt deliberate. Neon from the street reflected in impossible angles. Rain splattered like shards of glass against the window. I began to notice impossible details. Mara knew my routines before I mentioned them. She hummed songs I'd only whispered in the dark. She remembered old nicknames I hadn't spoken in years. Every gesture, every small habit, every intimate memory, I felt mirrored back at me, twisted. I told myself it made sense. I rationalized every creeping doubt. Exhaustion, trauma, overthinking. But the apartment was patient, observant, intelligent. My phone buzzed constantly. Emails read before I opened them. Messages replied to before I could. Social media profiles liked and unliked in patterns I didn't understand. Metadata? Clean. Tracking apps? Nothing. And yet she knew. Everything. Every detail. Every shadow of my life. One night, I stayed up watching. The kitchen light flickered, humming in a rhythm that felt like deliberate code. Footsteps in the hallway matched no one's path. Rain hit the window in patterns. I recorded everything. Cameras, apps, logs, diaries. Nothing made sense. I confronted Mara. She tilted her head, calm. You've been scared of the rules, but that's only because you're listening too closely. I froze. You wrote these. Her smile didn't falter. No, I didn't. I blinked. Then who? Her eyes softened, almost fond. The apartment did. It's alive in its own way, and it notices when boundaries are broken. I laughed, softly, nervously. That makes no sense. She shrugged, casual. You wanted rules. You follow them, you survive. You forget them, you change. I left the apartment that night, keys in hand, rain plastering my hair to my scalp. The city felt colder than ever. Neon puddles fractured beneath streetlights. Footsteps echoed in rhythm with my heartbeat. Cafes smelled faintly of burnt coffee and fear. I tried to ground myself. I told friends. Nobody believed me. Mara seemed impossible to locate. Weeks later, I returned, hoping to gather my things. The apartment smelled of antiseptic, rain, and something else, memory. Notes were posted again on the fridge. Same handwriting, same rules. I realized then that the apartment was not just following rules. It was teaching me, measuring me, observing me. I began leaving voice notes, logs, photos, everything I could. Recording metadata, installing cameras, tracing shadows. Everything confirmed nothing. Yet I felt her presence behind each door, in every humming appliance, in the reflections of windows that should have been empty. Eventually, I found the truth. Mara had not disappeared. She had been hiding on campus, terrified. The rules, the apartment, they had replaced her. The persona I had trusted, the warmth I had clung to, was constructed. A collection of traits, knowledge, memories harvested from past tenants. Every kind smile, every attentiveness, every knowing glance crafted. The confrontation came quietly. Police raided another apartment in the complex. Evidence collected. Journals, voice recordings, metadata manipulations, burner phones. Multiple identities. Each tenant mirrored, manipulated, observed. Constructed over months, maybe years. She never confessed fully. Why would she? She believed in the system. The rules were survival. The rules were identity. I returned once it was cleared. Rain dripped from the eaves. Neon pooled in the linoleum. Shadows lingered in corners. I touched the fridge lightly, stared at the notes, erased them with my sleeve. And yet, I knew the rules would remain, etched in memory, in my reflexes, in the way I answered knocks, in the way I ignored voices from kitchens. I survived, but I am different. Mirrors are no longer neutral. Hallways are no longer safe. Silence carries intent. Every hum, every flicker, every buzz is a measure of attention. I am alive, but I am watching. Always. I think now about boundaries, trust, memory. About how easy it is to give fragments of oneself away. About how fragile identity is, and how quietly the spaces we inhabit can claim it. The apartment waits. Always. And when I am alone, I can almost hear it whispering my name. And I do not answer.